calling to order the special meeting of the Bloomfield Hills Schools Board of Education. Today is May 1st, 2024 to 7 p.m. Trustee Noble, will you please take attendance?
Everyone is in attendance except for Trustee Southward, who is arriving here momentarily.
Yes, she'll be arriving within the next 10 minutes or so. Let's please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Moving on to Section 2 on the agenda, I want to review the community viewing and feedback opportunity. All meetings and interviews are open to the public, are being live streamed, cablecast, and are recorded for later viewing. Recordings and information on the Superintendent Search is available on the Board of Education's webpage. The Board of Education welcomes the perspectives of the community. Those present at the interviews and watching remotely may provide feedback to the board for its consideration by completing the survey form available on bloomfield.org/feedback. The survey will close at 4 p.m. on Thursday, May 9th. The Board of Education can also be reached by emailing board@bloomfield.org. Moving on to Section 3 of the agenda. This is the second round interview of Mr. Billy Shellenbarger, who is currently the superintendent for Clawson Public Schools. So, Mr. Shellenbarger, welcome. Good evening. On behalf of the Board of Education of Bloomfield Schools, I would like to welcome, sorry, I'm being repetitive here, Mr. Billy Shellenbarger back for a second round interview. I will take a few minutes to briefly describe our format. The interview process may take approximately 80 minutes. It will begin with a 20-minute presentation. Following your presentation, you will have approximately 60 minutes to answer 16 questions. 14 of those questions will come from board members. Each board member submitted 2, and then 2 from a student intern who is present today, a student board intern. Toward the end of the interview, we will give you an opportunity to ask questions of the board and make closing remarks. Just went back through how we can share feedback. All right. Mr. Shellenbarger, you may begin your presentation on the following topic: your 90-day entrance plan with special emphasis on how you will address the financial headwinds facing school districts like ours in Michigan.
Great. Thank you so much. I'll start by discussing the level of gratitude that people deserve today. Rebecca, Keith, Tim, your district, your principals, your staff, what a day. Saw some tremendous things, met some incredible people, a bunch of animals, a turtle, a rabbit, 4 dogs, and some amazing staff members. Clearly a high level of commitment to your district, your students, and your staff, and that was evident today. So thank you for that opportunity. Again, Billy Shellenbarger, I am the Clawson Public Schools Superintendent, and my path in public ed has led me through 3 districts: Birmingham Public Schools, Birmingham Seaholm as a high school teacher, Northville High School, one of the largest high schools in the state, 2,500 students, quite the place, as an assistant principal, and then back to Clawson as a middle school and high school principal, and now superintendent. And as I mentioned in our first round, prior to becoming a public educator, I was in the private sector for a decade. So a diverse level of experience brings me here today. So thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it very much. And I will begin. So as you said, this is my 90-day plan as the next superintendent of Bloomfield Hills Public Schools, as well as financial forecasting and outlook, I called it. So a lot of information here to pack into 20 minutes, but I think I can do it efficiently and thoroughly for everyone and those watching. Heavy narrative here that I'm certainly not going to read, but I want to start by talking about setting the tone and how I believe the tone is set from this room, from us 8, and certainly it's the superintendent's job to drive that on a daily basis with their energy, as I do today as the superintendent in Clawson. A big part of significant part of what the first 90 days would entail would be what I call listening, learning, and understanding. Not anything that is dissimilar to probably what and likely what many other superintendent candidates would do. But I will say this is the second time that I will have embarked on this listening, learning, and understanding campaign. Did the exact same work as the new superintendent of Clawson and continue that work today. This isn't a 90-day plan. This is an everyday plan, and this is part of it. And it certainly requires intentionality and boldness in my leadership as we do it, but it's important work as we set the tone and embark on this big step. I broke up my 90-day plan into 7 areas of focus. It was hard to whittle it down because these are all very important, and they're in no particular order. Each one of them will have its own slide and action steps that I'll go through. The first is culture and relationships. This starts with the connection to the board, both collectively and individually, as we build our relationships together and embark on the development of the new strategic plan. Very important work. Additionally, high level of focus on visibility and presence in and out of our district. Certainly, I talked about in the first round that I'm the type of leader that is going to go where people are, and that will certainly be a part of this 90-day plan and beyond. Then you get into teams, connecting with teams as we build culture and relationships together, certainly the cabinet, all the central office, and you talk about expectations and understanding their work, but also the expectations from the superintendent in terms of our leadership style and our drive and plan as a group of 8. I think it's important as well to transition to staff and the community, and the first 90 days of this position would entail the summer when staff is not necessarily here. So you carve out time and opportunities to bring them out and give them that, be that conduit to what the work that we are doing. And then you transition into more formal work once the school year starts, and it's work that I do now monthly. I call it the Sit with the Sup coffee chat, and once a month we do that, and it's an opportunity for the community to connect, informal dialogue and open discussion, and it's really been very fruitful for our district and our success. Certainly engaging with our building leadership is crucial. Have to build a dynamic team as a former principal and assistant principal and building leader. That's imperative in this work. And then lastly, as it pertains to action steps under this area of focus would be connecting with our labor team, certainly, and our UNICEF director to build those relationships. As a superintendent now, I have to cultivate all of this. It's not one pocket of the district. It's facilitating all of this work in every pocket of our district, from students and building level staff to our cabinet and our team, leadership team. That is imperative, and that is the work that I do and would bring seamlessly to Bloomfield Hills. The second piece of this is academic excellence, and we're fortunate to have a learning services team here, and you start there and work with the learning services assistant superintendent and his team, the directors, and then transition that into building principals. Again, those individuals are crucial related to the work that we do, discussing and understanding from my perspective offerings, opportunities, achievement, and certainly gaps, which we talked about in the first round, and how we can do that. I put in parentheses here systems, and I'm going to talk about systems a lot this evening related to what systems we have in place to address all of these needs. One thing that's important, one aspect of leadership to me that's important is going arm in arm with our staff, and we ask our staff to grow a lot, specifically our instructional staff around professional development, and we're going to grow with them. We're going to grow together. We're going to sit at the table with them and work through all things instruction, mental health, curriculum, and so we understand what our students are seeing. That's important from a leadership perspective for me. And you do that, you see the fruits of that work through daily building visits and classroom visits, which will be a significant part of that work. So from an academic excellence perspective, that experience that I draw from, that I started with, teacher, assistant principal, and now superintendent, I understand the rigors of a place like Birmingham and teaching those incredible kids, and then understanding the aspects of injecting new and strong curriculum and instructional strategies into a place like Northville for our top-end kids, but also leading the charge with our MTSS process in that building to ensure that all students are represented and intervened on so we can grow. And then fast forward to the work at Clawson, where I've talked about we wear many hats. All of those hats continue to be worn by all of us from a leadership perspective related to academic excellence and growth. Leadership team, it's monumental in terms of the success of a district, the team that you build, and embracing that work with those teams, principals, directors, cabinet. It starts there. That work starts there in building, trusting relationships with them. Very, very important work. One thing that I want to note is related to cabinet. You meet weekly with your cabinet, and my cabinet would meet in a building each week, and we would spend 30 to 45 minutes in classrooms, and so our entire cabinet team can see the work that is being done at the building level. I think is very important. It builds trust, and it builds connection with, I talked to a number of teachers today that brought that up, related to that work and being present and modeling that, and that's something we would do. Certainly would do some team building work, which I'm a big proponent of in August to kick off our year and start some really strong momentum as a leadership team, and collaborate with Keith and his team on any areas holes we need to fill with high quality, high character and individuals related to leadership. And then lastly, planning some PD and leadership coaching for our leadership team, including myself. Again, we ask our instructional staff to grow and work through professional development, so we need to model that and do the same, and that is important. And excuse me, again, the work that we do today around the growth of our leaders and development of them is work that I am very proud of, and that is very important to myself and our district. In the space that where staffing is difficult in public ed, teachers, parapros, leadership, I love the opportunity to build what we have. And when you take my passion and experience for leadership in public ed, and having sat in the seats that all of our building level leaders specifically have sat in, and then having that trusting relationship in place with a very coachable team, which I'm blessed to have, growth happens. And that's working really well for us in Clawson. Safety and security and operations related to our bond, this could certainly be as high a priority as any. The team related to our operations group, our physical plant group, safety team, and security teams, which most districts have. I met our lead director of safety and security this morning, and our SROs certainly, which you're fortunate to have two in this district, to understand protocols, walk buildings, see where areas of need are, and also what we're really doing well from a safety and security perspective. On the backside of that, it's understanding the work that's happening with the construction team. And as I mentioned in round one, I'm the primary decision maker in our district related to our bond, and I sit at the table every week, and I would look forward to bringing my background, I don't want to say expertise around construction, but certainly background and acumen related to a bond and construction work in a public school that I have to our OAC meetings here. Finally, I think it's important, and we do this in Clawson, connecting with our municipal law enforcement. And when you're talking about safety, you want to talk about access to buildings, proximity, response. Those are things that we need to be in lockstep with, so you can't do enough of that work. And as a teacher at Birmingham Seaham, I never thought that once I left there, the next decade of time as a leader would be spent as the lead in Northville and Clawson related to safety and security. I never saw that coming, but it's been here for 10 years related to the work that we do operationally in our buildings to keep our students and staff safe. I'm proud of that work. I'm confident in that work. And again, my ability to transition here and bring that background would be seamless. Equity and inclusion, I touched on the importance of this in the first round, and this starts with student voice. I sat in the room today and was asked this question. 30 kids were in that room, and a student asked a question about my commitment to it. And I said, my commitment is to you. My commitment is to your voice. My commitment is listening to you. We're not going to guess what equity and inclusion looks like in this district. We're going to find out from our most important entity and aspects of our district to really understand and dig in. So that'll happen immediately with our students in the form of these listening sessions and advisory councils. Important to me, as I mentioned, and they confirmed to me today that unified sports is a big part of what you do here, and that needs to continue to be a pillar of some success and work that we do in terms of inclusivity related to our students with disabilities. Diving in with our equity and inclusion teams to be a part of it, as well as our learning services team related to subgroup areas, learning gaps, but also the work that those teams are doing around EI. That's very important. And I think finally, it's important to connect with community leaders and step outside of the district to do that work as well, because there's very influential people here that are not in our school district that can support us. This picture on this slide is of our high school student advisory council, and I talked today about the value in everyone's path and putting those paths at the table with those students at BHS. And again, it's up to them. Their voice is what I need to hear. Their voice is what we need to hear, and I committed to them that that's the work that we will do. Because if we're not doing that with intentionality and modeling that, then it's fraudulent work, essentially. But it starts with them. It starts with them. And I look forward to that. Community engagement, this is a great one. Again, our coffee chats would be a pillar of what we do. Collaborating with our municipal leaders. For example, right now in Clawson, bi-weekly I meet with our city manager so we can collaborate and be great partners. We have actually brought our two teams together, the school board and the city council, for a joint meeting and created a task force out of it. So that's important, I think, work here as well. I'll continue that visibility and certainly do some intentional work with our PTO groups who again, are a phenomenal connection between our district and our parent groups. And this goes back to my why a little bit that I'll talk about tonight. It's the community piece of what is possible here for me personally that I'm so engaged in. Lastly, mental health and wellness balance. This is working with our mental health support staff and all of our ancillary staff around what that looks like. What are the resources we have for kids and supports? And certainly, unfortunately, it has to be around some aspects of threat assessment work and process. Again, I know SEL curriculum is part of one of the pillars of curriculum in your district. Would want to understand that and be a part of that. Implement some initiatives like we have that are working in Clawson right now around balance, and then finally collaborating with our learning services team around some mental health PD. This picture defines it all. I'm truly obsessed with our therapy dog program, and it has changed the dynamic in our district, as I talked about in the first round. And this is Lionel, one of our guys at the middle school who has helped a number of kids, and I have watched it change the culture in our district. So let's transition to financial outlook and forecasting. What I did was I put this into 3 buckets: success areas, areas to consider, and then some action steps. So much of this is you already know, but I think it's important to note for those watching, significant levels of access. I give you incredible kudos as a district and as a community for passing the bond, passing the sinking fund, and executing your plan related to both of those. Obviously, stepping away from that general fund and using these dollars to integrate into our district or your district is certainly imperative and a gift. So again, well done. A couple of aspects that I want to touch on. One, as I listened to Keith's presentation in January, talked about some things like your maintenance garage, for example, where rent was going out to pay for it, and now it's coming back in through the bond, and those are monies that, albeit not necessarily significant, every bit counts, those are coming back into the general fund. Same with roofing needs are being addressed right now through the sinking fund. So great work being done. Clearly, additionally, great work being done by your finance group. The snapshot over time, 5 or 6 years related to your fund equity is fantastic. It's at the high end of that sweet spot. Our accounting firm always is wanting us to be in that 15 to 20% range, and you land there consistently. Clearly, revenues exceeding expenditures is where it all starts and ends, and that work is, as of June, which is some of the diligence that I did, is being done and being done well. I watched Ms. Moynihan's presentation around the operating deficit and budget amendment mid-year, and clearly she and her team have a great plan for rectifying that and moving into the summer and next year with some great corrections related to that concern. The foundation allowance is strong, obviously, from state and local entities, and being a hold harmless district, that is certainly a strength. And based on the governor's proposed state budget, that would go up potentially, which if Bloomfield Hills did not lose another student, it would be near $2 million in increase to the general fund next year, which would be fantastic for all districts, certainly. So that is an area to keep our eye on. And 2 other areas that I think are important, I saw them today, Bloomin' East and Bloomin' West today. Really well done related to that planning. That's an additional revenue stream for the district and certainly alleviates waiting lists and creates more space. Have to staff it, which can be a concern, but that pipeline is important to note. In Clawson, we know that 7 out of 10 students who enter our child care program stay in our district. And that's important data, and the more that can be a part of the 2 child care ECC facilities, certainly the better. And lastly, grant funding, we know a lot of it's falling off, but certainly there's some proposed in the new budget, which would continue to help us. Areas to consider, certainly the trends in enrollment, and I'll skip to this and then go back. This is the trend over the last 6 years here based on the My School Data report, which is the state reporting entity around budgets and enrollment. And this decline is happening, as I mentioned, in 24 or 28 districts. And I sit in the room with all of those superintendents and having discussions about how we rectify that. And it's not an easy one, but I have some thoughts on it. So just if those students, 472 over the course of that 5 years, were here based on the foundation allowance, that would be $6 million. And again, that is an issue across the county and the state that is certainly concerning, that we certainly can address directly and both indirectly. The grant funding piece, which may be falling off, it's important to note that being responsible with those grants around legacy costs. What do I mean by that? Grants, to the extent they can be used for non-human beings, we'll just say, static safety work and doors or windows, one-time costs. When you get into personnel, that can be tough because grants go away and you have to make some decisions related to the general fund. Sometimes that is certainly out of our control, and I'll talk about some areas to touch on to potentially correct that. As Ms. Moynihan said, 93% of the expenditures in the district are staffing and personnel, so always paying attention to that, along with labor agreements. And the political landscape can work through that state budget for us that indirectly can be altered, which tends to be out of our control. Last slide, actions to consider. I think the most important action to consider around a lot of things, but certainly finance, is what systems do we have in place to ensure that there are no surprises, that we stay proactive and not reactive. For example, in our district, it's micro and macro, for example. The micro aspect of it is me sitting across the table from my assistant super finance every week and talking about our budgets, negotiations, whatever the flavor of the time of year is. And right now it's staffing, it's budgeting for next year, and it's all of the things that I just talked about. Then you build from there. On the top end of that kind of macro level is our finance committee, which we meet once a month. It's board, it's myself, it's our assistant super finance, and we go line by line to ensure that we understand what our expenditures are, where they're going, and we ask questions, among other aspects of that meeting, but that's the bulk of it. An offshoot of it is a facilities committee, which you likely have, and that includes your construction team, finance, superintendent, facilities related to spending around a bond. What systems do you have in place to ensure that things are moving accordingly and there's no surprises? Continued sinking fund use, continued paying attention to staffing needs. If in a shrinking district, you have to do that, as many are. And in dire times, which clearly are not here in Bloomfield related to fund equity, you look at things like shared time or retirement incentives as options for you. Continued grant work and staying ahead of that. I talked to Keith a little bit about some staffing for grant coordinator, et cetera, to keep a tight eye on that, because when they're here, we need to be ready for them and really jump on that, because they're very, very helpful. Plan for your bond interest income, which Keith clued me in on in our time today. That is earmarked, which is great. And then you have to look at everything, as Ms. Moynihan said. You have to scrub your budgets and do some reviews and service contract reviews and program audits. Those are all important aspects of the work that we need to do to ensure that we're staying solvent and strong. Everyone has a piece in this. So as finances have thread their way through all of the 7 areas of focus that and most everything in our district, and central office collaboration is crucial in that regard. Touched on childhood, which is a outside-the-box revenue stream, which is fantastic. 20 more seconds? Okay. Marketing plan. So when we lose students, what's our plan from a marketing perspective? And certainly, we talked today about all of the opportunities that students have around Bloomfield to go somewhere else related to private schools, and how do we retain and recruit? What is our plan to do that? What are we doing around open houses? What are we doing around things like social media and promoting our district? That's important. And the indirect aspects of what we can control is also enrollment, obviously. The budget tied to election years, which this year is one. Oakland County enhancement millage, not sure where that's heading, and certainly we can't control what grants we get, but just being prepared for them when they come. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. A lot of info in 20 minutes, but we did it.
That's a lot to try and get in there, so I understand. So
thanks.
Thank you for for putting that all together.
You got it.
Appreciate it. All right, so at this time, we are going to move on to let you sit down, take a breather, because it was a lot to have to get through. Now we're going to go through each trustee's questions. Starting with myself, what ideas, I'm sorry. This is a real breather. I said I'd let you take a breather, and then I just kept talking.
All good.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. All right, so starting with myself, what ideas do you have to create an organizational framework for all school administrators to follow that will ensure they are aligned with the goals and direction from the district?
So what ideas do you have to create organizational framework? Okay. Sure. Likely much of what I'm going to reference in many of my answers will go back to my presentation. So the framework touches on that leadership slide a little bit. I'll go back to interview 1 and talking about how I lead. And I told those students today that if I'm leading from my office, I'm failing you, and that it's the same with our school administrators. So true collaboration means human-to-human connection and being a part of building trusting relationships. So from day one, as I build that, I can speak empathetically and certainly from an informed space related to my experience. So any school administrator that you have today, assistant principal, principal, central office, I can speak to experience related to all of those areas. So now we have to put some framework in place. I mentioned cabinet meetings. Let's start there. So cabinet meetings would be a weekly meeting, and as I said, we would do that in buildings. We want to connect to our students. We want to connect to our teams, our parapros, our secretaries, our teachers, and truly model what we're trying to do here in terms of unifying the district, building strong culture. The framework of connection, around connection, and modeling that would be weekly. Everybody from the cabinet team would be a part of that. And what that's modeling is being engaged in our kids and instruction, and that's a framework that we would follow all year. So the benefit of that, and as I spoke to a handful of teachers today about it in some of your buildings, is that one of them in particular, your high school art teacher, talked about how important that made him feel. And that is the goal around a framework related to building great leaders. Now, we have to transition to our building level leadership as well, and one of the conversations I had with a parent today was around just that, and how we operate at the building level pertaining to growth, to building ourselves into a premier academic district in this state, and certainly in the county. And I'll go back to systems. We'll fall back on systems. So related to framework, we have to have systems in place that they can follow. So I know it's important. Academic excellence is important. I know that there's expectation there, and we need to grow. I'll give you a specific example. One area of growth and need in the district is secondary level, high school, specifically math. I think 52% of students are proficient in math in the high school. And we have the same issue. Math is on the secondary levels, our same concern at our school. So what systems do our principals have in place and framework to address that? One is an MTSS process. What does that look like? Who's a part of that team? Who's leading it? And there needs to be strength there. That's a principal, that's an assistant principal leading that charge in putting together a great team to implement this framework related to growing our students. And if it's math, I had a great conversation with your math interventionist at North Hills today. And she's doing great work pulling out and pushing in to address gaps there. And the same needs to be done at the high school level. I'm not sure if there are math interventionists there. There very well may be. But you have to have places to send kids related to intervention. So this framework of a system of a multi-tiered system of support that each school likely has, that's great. but who's leading it? What are they leading? What are the intervention options, certainly? And is it truly dialed into our needs and our gaps? So those are two different frameworks with two different groups that I think would be, and I'll be sitting at the table as much as I can and given the opportunity to be a part of MTS's processes so I can understand what we're doing here. But working with our learning services team and curriculum directors to certainly understand those processes, but our building administration is really important as it pertains to that. So that would be the organizational framework that I would want them to follow immediately.
Thank you. All right, second one from me. Cell phones and social media are creating a modern-day mental health crisis for our youth. What can a school district do to combat this crisis and make sure our students are focused and emotionally protected from this drastically increasing problem?
Just had this conversation with our assistant principal at the high school last week. So, it runs the gamut related to cell phones. You have places like Flint Public Schools who have completely banned them in their district. They're not allowed on the property. You have schools like ours where we provide teachers with the opportunity to have a phone caddy, and some enforce it and some don't. So I think that goes back to very strong guided leadership at the building level, so specific to your cell phone question. If there is direction and policy in place, it's up to our leadership to enforce it, to be firm with it, and then on the backside of that, we really need support from our parent community. Because that's where they come from, right? The cell phones come from, and I absolutely get it. The battle is, and we talk about this a lot with safety and security, if you ban a cell phone from a classroom and there is an act of violence in your school, parents want to connect with their child. So that's I can appreciate that. We've met in the middle with that with the cell phone caddy idea, and I just had the conversation with our assistant principal about next year. We need to drive the screw in a little bit tighter because it is a problem. And access to social media during the school day creates a further problem and exacerbates problems that we have. For example, if you have a fight in a school and then students have access to their cell phone, that can continue and build through social media during the school day, which is a significant problem. So I'm a firm advocate of strong enforcement of that because I agree with you. It is a problem. It impedes instruction, not for necessarily the teacher, but for kids in the room who really are there to learn and be a part of it when others are not really adhering to what a policy, for example, might be. So in my opinion, in our district at Clawson, we're going to take a strong step related to, and we're going to enforce that in every single classroom. Those phones, student walks in the door and it goes in that caddy. And there's accountability for it. And this goes back to what you asked me in the first round around strong decisions and standing in the face of it when there's opposition. There's going to be opposition. My son or daughter didn't do that or that's too harsh. But if we have support from our board, if we have policy in place, if it's in our handbook, if we go over it with our parent community, if we work through it with our students at the beginning of the year, and then show that what we say we mean through holding them accountable, I think that's a great process, and we're truly going to dig in on that between now and Labor Day of next school year in our district.
Thank you. Trustee Falah.
All right. Well, thank you for spending a jam-packed day with us. Appreciate
It was awesome.
you going
Thank
around.
you. Thank you.
Yeah. Sounds like you had quite the road show. So
Had a day.
That was good. So first question I have is, as the new leader for our district, it will be critical to build effective relationships and also ensure accountability as you move forward. How do you balance those two critical needs, which at times may conflict directly with one another? What can staff expect and what can the board expect as examples of you succeeding in those areas?
Okay. So we're talking about staff, we're talking about leadership, and we're talking about our parent community. So I am all three of those. I'm a parent, I was a teacher. I was a building principal at Northville High School as well as Clawson. And so I've lived that. I've lived those spaces. So when I build relationships with those individuals, trusted relationships, which clearly is how I lead and very, very important to me, that's a significant part of the culture that we need to build. I can speak from an informed space. I can speak empathetically with all of them because I've sat in the room with a tough parent after a discipline case as a principal or an assistant principal. I have been in the room with an MTSS team or been a part of curriculum building and instructional strategy injection into the math department and the English department, for example, at Northville. I have taught rigorous curriculum at Birmingham Seaholm. I've been all of those. So when you combine just simply how I lead related to modeling strong leadership with my experience and background, I think that lends itself to trust related to accountability. So when I have to have a heavyweight conversation, which superintendents have to have, they don't have to be heavy because there's trust there, because I've done that work and I've been successful in that space. So that lends itself to growth, certainly when they're very coachable, which most are, and holding all of those individuals accountable for the work that we need to do is important from my chair, but having that experience and leading the way I do would lend itself to that growth that we would need to have to move in the direction related to our goals and our path and vision and mission of the district. And I want to make sure that I'm answering that the entirety. I think that's it. I believe in that, and you can easily sit here and say you build great relationships and you have them. Anybody can say it, but at the end of the day, that is real. That is the work that I do. Students, staff, leadership, community, board, phenomenal relationship with our board. They've actually empowered me through this process like I never thought that really could happen. They've been so supportive. So my ability to build that with those different entities, the work is there. I mean, it's real. It's real. So, and I know that you may come to my district next week, and I would welcome that so you could truly see it.
Great, thank you.
Second question is, what is the most challenging aspect of this position that you believe will be difficult for you stepping into the role? Please explain how you will handle this challenge and provide any examples from your past which are similar that you have overcome, or the traits and skills which you possess which would allow you to be successful.
Similar question to the first round of interviews, and I'll say a similar answer. The most challenging part of being a superintendent, in my opinion, is driving the decisions that we need to drive that come from this team, our strategic plan, our goals. And at some point, somebody has to step away from the table, walk outside, talk to the community, talk to staff, talk to students, and drive that messaging. And that's the superintendent. That is me. That's the work that I do now. And it's important work. That is a challenge because no one wants to be pushed up against related to their decisions. No one wants any adversarial levels of conversation. We talked about it in the first round of interviews. It's going to be there. I'm smart enough to know that if you sit in this seat, it's coming. But as you talked about, strong decision-making is crucial for this district and for you, and that's the work that we do. So stepping into this role, knowing that there are going to be decisions that have to be made at times in any role, in any superintendency, that might be met with concern, disagreement, the opposite side of the opinion or conversation. That's okay, because I'll go back to being extremely collaborative, and I told those students today, equity and inclusion. When it comes to equity and inclusion, it starts with you. So I'm going to have a conversation with you and all of you often, and I'm going to listen to you so we understand what you need. And when you put those pieces in the room from a collaborative perspective, that lends itself to, and you're following your plans as a district and your goals, that lends itself to informed decision-making. And with the support of our board and our leadership team, I'm okay when it's just fine if somebody's going to disagree, because we're doing it for them, and I told them that today. I didn't become a teacher in 2010 to necessarily be anything but that, and they're the ones who drive that. It's being a part of their lives and being impacted by them. So voices in the room, collaboratively, informed decision-making will lend itself to, I think, success. I don't think success, I know success because we're doing it now. I'm doing it now in our district. I talked about bond. I wrote some ideas down around tough decisions. You have discipline hearings, tough decision around discipline. Those come to me. I have the safety and security of our entire district in my office, and those are tough decisions, and people don't often agree. But again, informed, collaborative with our leadership team, and I think those are examples of how we would address that. And again, I live that now, and I don't think anybody necessarily ever becomes fully comfortable with it, but we overcome it. And I think with that level of transparency that I lead with, I mean, we're transparent to a fault, and maybe not to a fault, but very transparent around everything we do, as clearly you are as well. And I think that's very important. So when you marry all of those together, I think you will certainly have plenty of success in this position.
Okay. Thank you. Trustee Colin?
We just came out of a budget meeting where we need to reduce expenses for our future budget. Given your past experiences and research on Bloomfield, what specifically would you do to reduce costs on Bloomfield with the least impact on the classroom?
Sure. Keith and I talked about this today. So we're so driven by our funding around foundation allowance per pupil. And now I'm almost talking about that too much, but it's real. It's real. And you have to address it. When you lose 500 students and we've lost 600, you don't necessarily maintain the exact same level of staffing, for example, that you did when you were, Dan talked about the high school was at 1,800, now it's at 1,550. Am I saying you cut staff? No. There are ways to do it through natural attrition, and we do that in our district. That's where you look first. But I'll come back to that in one second, but let's talk about where that begins related to personnel. And 93%, as Ms. Moynihan said in her presentation, of expenditures in this district are from human beings. And a bulk of that is from your teaching staff. So as a former master scheduler of a 2,500 student high school and then a 600 student high school, that master schedule and what we do with it is a game of Tetris. Certifications and needs and class sizes and overall class sizes. What's your senior class look like? That might be 30 more kids than your freshman class. And it's a heavy lift, but it's important because that quickly shows you what you need. For example, how many sections you need or don't need. And my experience with that allows me to speak very confidently when I'm at the table weekly with my assistant superintendent of finance around those areas. So now let's go back to the natural attrition point. I'll give you an example. If a top-of-the-scale teacher in Bloomfield Hills retires, at the top of the scale in this district, it costs the district probably around $150,000 all in. If you spend some time related to backfilling those positions during the time that you need to reduce expenses, maybe that year or two, the focus is around teachers who are newly graduated from college or a few years out, which they cost the district about half of that amount. So in a second, with one human being, in exchange of that human being, you're not cutting staffing, you're saving $75,000 through just the exchange of 2 individuals. You do that 5 times, and all of a sudden, things are adding up. It's about some intentional focus from the planning that we do here and staying in the hip pocket of our finance team to understand what messaging we have to take to our buildings, which again, work I do now. In those micro and macro level meetings, that information goes to our building level administrators from me, because they are the ones who know. They are the ones who are responsible for building those schedules and staffing, and they're important in this equation. That's one space that you certainly look at, which can be extremely helpful. I mentioned a couple of other pieces in my presentation. One of those was shared time work. Shared time is a little bit of a secret in our state. Shared time means that, for example, we have a teacher who teaches in Clawson for 3 days, and then we share them with St. Mary's School in Royal Oak for 2 days. And we get credit for those FTEs. Are there FTEs, meaning foundation allowance? 1 FTE is 1 student. And are there areas to pursue shared time opportunities with the extensive level of private schools that surround us that all need shared time teachers? They need to provide that as well. So we do a little bit of that with 2 private schools in Clawson now. A handful of schools in our county do that as well, but it's something that you look at. Keith and I talked about it today, and we're naming off the schools that surround yours, Bloomfield Hills. And he said about a quarter of the students attend those. So, and then lastly, I'll finish with this, and this is a little bit of a longer-term plan, and this is what we do in Clawson. I'm an advocate of recruiting and retaining through the work that we do. It's like being recruited to college to play a sport. You go where you like the coach, for example, you feel supported. It's no different here. Leadership counts, leadership matters. I told the students today, you go where you feel valued, you go where you feel supported. And if students feel valued and supported, they won't leave. If students feel valued and supported, they'll hopefully come. And what are we doing from a leadership perspective to address that and how we operate from a culture perspective, but also I'll go back to the marketing of this district. And I don't know the specific marketing plan that is a part of this district, but it should be extensive. I mean, I walked every single building in your district today. The level of pride that I would have as the superintendent or principal or student or parent in the commitment that you all have to your students and your staff related to the facilities that you're providing is truly amazing. Talk about impactful. That's important that people know that, because I've been to a lot of places in this county related to educational institutions, public and private. And what you're doing is so state-of-the-art that will likely be unmatched in this county. People need to know about that. People need to know about that. So that's on us to build that and to market that so we recruit and retain, which would certainly lend itself to some change in that budget. Long answer, but pretty passionate about that one.
Many staff members have concerns about the professional development provided to them. What would be your specific strategy in regards to professional development that have worked in the past, helps our educators, and has the biggest impact on teaching and learning in the classroom?
Right. So as a teacher, I've lived it. You know, you sometimes you are at the table going, you know, there's so many more things I could be doing that would lend themselves to productivity in my classroom, but there's something that's not necessarily impactful in front of you at that time, and that's tough. So I'll go back to a word that I used a few times in round one, and that's balance. Obviously, instructional-based PD is important, and that's what we often do. Curriculum-based PD is important, and that's what we often do. And I mentioned that it's going to be an expectation as your superintendent that we sit at the table with our teachers. We're asking our teachers to grow in professional development and We want to stand in the back with our cup of coffee and then leave after 15 minutes and go answer emails for 3 hours? That's not modeling teamwork, collaboration, culture building. We need to sit at the table with them and learn with them. Our students are the beneficiaries of that work. Why would we not want to be a part of that work and know what they're getting? So I think that that's important. But balanced PD. So here's what we do in our district. I believe we balance it very well. Our teachers get instructional-based PD, curriculum-based PD, and it's great. We have 2 curriculum directors, and they absolutely hit grand slams every PD day. Very, very proud of the work that they do. We also have mixed in mental health, professional development. And I told students today when they asked me a question about mental health that a balanced teacher, we're human beings too, right? And a balanced teacher, staff member, is your best teacher and staff member. As human beings, things are happening in our lives and that can impact us. So we need to incorporate balance-based wellness PD into our year annually. We do it in Clawson. We did an a la carte-based mental health and wellness PD, yoga, art therapy, meditation. And the level of appreciation that they had for that work was tremendous. It showed that we're listening to them. It showed that they, as people, matter to us and we value them. And they're, especially coming out of what we dealt with from a COVID-19 perspective, people were in a different space and we needed to address that and help. And then lastly, one thing that goes to the equity and inclusion work that we do, my first year as superintendent, MLK Day, we're in the district for PD, and we did instruction and curriculum work on that day. I didn't believe in it. So I believe in service. As a servant leader, I believe in service. So that day is a day of service for us. The last 2, so we went to work on where can we go and serve, right? And the last 2 years, I personally have been in at Cass Community Center in Detroit, both years with 10 teachers. First year in the kitchen, and this year on MLK Day, we shredded documents for 6 hours, and it was a blast. And that was important. That was a PD day. So we were serving others. We were balancing the work that we do as a district, and our leadership was shoulder to shoulder with them. So key word to answer this question is balance, and I think that that's integral.
I'll be asking the next 2 questions. My first one's on curriculum. How would you go about assessing the effectiveness of a particular curriculum?
I'll start with my experience in Northville. So I oversaw the English department and the math department. And we spent a significant amount of time altering the curriculum and certainly injecting new instructional strategies into our classrooms. Significant amount of time. So let's go back to voice. We need to understand, you can look at a test score, you can look at data and certainly use that. You can. But you have very smart students. I had a conversation with one of your curriculum directors today talking about a student in elementary school who is in Algebra 2. Algebra 2 is a junior level class, sophomore level class in high school. Smart kids. And smart enough to know what's working and what's not. My opinion, you start there with their voice and understanding how they feel about it. Is it meeting their needs? Those who need to be challenged, are they being challenged? Is there enough rigor? That's important, because often when you are in a classroom, which we will be in weekly, daily, to understand what that looks like, oftentimes engagement speaks volumes around the curriculum, but also the instructional strategies that are implementing that curriculum, which are equally as important. So there are those intangibles like engagement that you can gauge it on, conversations that you should gauge it on with students, and certainly your instructors. Clearly there is a a strong level of instruction happening and some very talented individuals leading that at the classroom level. So those two entities, it starts there in terms of understanding how they feel about it. And then you have two great curriculum directors and a learning services team that when you sit down to start to dig in and dig in deeper, you bring some of those people out of the building to include them in that conversation. And let's just say this, you don't change a curriculum without the voice of those who are implementing it. I mean, that has to be in the room, and you have to understand how they feel about it. And certainly it can be tied to the work that they do, and whether it's grades or tests or standardized testing, that's important. But I think the effectiveness of a particular curriculum can be assessed a number of ways, but it starts with the conversations with those stakeholders.
My next question's on strategic plans. How would you go about developing a strategic plan for Bloomfield schools? And how long do you think it would take to pull one together when you're involving multiple stakeholders?
Right. So my experience with the strategic plan, and we're due as well, much like you are in our district and about to embark, is as a principal, having and again, in the district I'm in, we wear many hats, and I was part of leading that plan as a principal in 20 and 21. So I think you start with, I don't think you start with, I know you start with two facets. Obviously, what's important to you as a body who leads this district. And then certainly including, I'll go back to something that may be redundant tonight, but the voices of the people that we serve, and including all of that in the conversation. Now, in my opinion, the work of MLI, they do great work with strategic planning, and I would love to seek out guidance, support, and help from those who do it very well, and do it in many other districts to ensure that we're doing it the right way. I would hope that over the course of a semester, so by the start of a new year, as you embark on a new school year, that could be complete. And I think, obviously, to your point, it takes a lot of time related to getting all of those individuals in the room, but that's intentional work that's important to our district, to your district, and to you as a board. So we will be intentional and bold with that work and certainly prioritize it. So over the course of a semester of a school year, which is what we were able to do to implement it, I think that you'd be able to do it with those, getting all of the voices that you need in the room, which is important. What are our needs? Understanding what our needs are and attacking them from a strategic planning perspective, but then also seeking out some guidance from a group like MLI who does that often and utilizing that as a resource.
Thank you. Over to Trustee Noble.
All right. What is your approach to dealing with discussions about potentially difficult topics such as race, religion, politics, or sexual orientation? Please provide a specific example.
This came up a little bit today with students and approach to dealing with discussions. One thing that I have learned, and I talked about it in round one, learn to be a really good listener. And you can't lead a district without doing that well. So these different aspects of this question, race, religion, politics, and sexual orientation, draw out emotion and are very important to different people at different levels and important to me. So number one, it's important that we listen, because oftentimes that's a crux of the need or the concern. People just want to be heard. So I think that that's important. And we're great listeners and supporters. We have resources in our district in Clawson, and you have them in Bloomfield Hills that can address all of these. And that's and I'll use the term safe space. And we talked to your students today about that. It's our job to create a safe space for them. And people who feel that they have that safe space or safe people stay because they feel valued and supported and heard. So it has to start there. A specific example is my first year as a principal. This was 2018. A student who was a rising freshman, this was August, and I'd been on the job for 1 month, single mom, parent, and student who was transitioning from female to male, name, everything, wanted to meet. They were significant level of anxiety about entering high school with underneath this or related to this transition. So we met with our counselor, and we simply listened, understood, supported. This is all about listening and supporting. And very simply made a plan for that student. And over the course of the next 4 years, we and that student executed that plan, supported that student within that plan. That student graduated, and I had one of the most impactful conversations outside the church 2 years ago with that student after commencement about that 4-year time together. So, yeah, these are tough. These are tough, but they're important to our kids, and we can't duck them. We can't avoid them. I think we need to take them head on, but by taking them head on, you start by listening to them and then supporting them in any way that we can related to what's important to them.
What role does a school district play in student mental health and well-being? Please describe your experience in these areas.
Yeah, I mean, more so now than ever. It's in my 90-day plan. I was going fast, but you saw the words threat assessment in there. And over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, the amount that I have been associated with is staggering, and it's troubling. You know, so it's clearly our students' mental health and well-being is a concern, and is something that we take and need to continue to take seriously. Our students spend minimum 6 hours with us a day. If our students get home by 4 o'clock, my son's in bed by 9. He spends more time with Mrs. Bros at West Maple than he does with his dad. So it's important that we certainly address this, certainly support it, and implement resources and supports. I put this on my 90-day plan related to an area of focus, understanding it with our mental health professionals here. Clearly, there is a plethora of resources here, and I keep going back to things that are impactful, but you know, I saw all of these dogs and smiles around them and people participating with them today. That's a support and that's a resource. Because sometimes in my district, our space is the most positive space that a student has. They don't go home to the positivity that they get in our building. They don't go home to, we feed them 2 meals a day. You know, they go home to 1. So knowing that our school communities are that vital to our kids, some more than others, it's imperative that we continue to support them and stay proactive with those supports, continue to assess and analyze the resources that we have in place, ancillary staff, therapy dog program, threat assessment work, and stay on top of all of that. And that is important. So experiences specifically with that, I'll say this. When I was an assistant principal at Northville, we had a student who walked out of the building and left a note with a teacher. And about 2 minutes after that teacher was left, the teacher read it and had some concerning things, and we, about 10 people, embarked on this large 800 student vehicle parking lot. And we found this student in the car attempting to take her own life. And myself and our principal approached the car at the same time on opposite sides. And it was one of the most eye-opening experiences of my life. And it certainly solidified and solidifies the work that we have to do, because that happened at our school. That happened in our space where that student is safe and supported. but clearly not enough. So we have to reflect again on what we are doing, needs, assess it, implement. And the one thing I don't want to do, and I say this about safety, I don't want something to happen around mental health and well-being or school safety and say, well, we couldn't afford X, Y, or Z. Couldn't afford an SRO. Couldn't afford another social worker. Couldn't afford a safe space or opportunity for that student. That's not an option. So then that puts some emphasis on the work that I and we do as a cabinet to ensure that that area is funded and resources and supports are in place. So the short answer to your question of the role that we play, it's a big one. It's a big one. It's a heavy one, and it's never been more difficult than now. But I think districts are doing a great job, yours included, of implementing some support strategies and resources to ensure that our students' mental health and well-being is addressed.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I have the next questions for you. Please describe your leadership experience working with diverse constituents. How do you develop a culture of inclusion for all?
Again, question came up today with one of your students. It's a great question, and I'll go back to the work that we do now, and I promise you, I don't mean to be repetitive, but it's important. Sitting here in this great facility in our office around a conference room table, talking about what our students need related to culture, inclusion, is great, but it's not correct. Talking about that without our kids is not great leadership. So they have to be incorporated, and not just once, but consistently. And that's in my opinion, of modeling commitment to equity and inclusion. And I told your student today, he's a freshman, I said, it's my job to model that. I model it by coming to you. I model it by coming to you. And that picture I showed you of our high school, that is a picture of today on that slide presentation of our high school student advisory council. And that picture defines our school. It's students with paths that come to us from Pontiac, from the city of Clawson, from Madison Heights, Oak Park, and the narrative is different for every single one of them. Every single one of them. But we sit around the table and we talk about it. And it's an opportunity for them to hear each other and learn and understand how to value each other's path. So when they see each other in the hallway, they know the story, they know the narrative, and if somebody else doesn't and maybe speaks out of school about somebody, they can step in because they know that story. So their voice, the value in that path is crucial. And I told you that student today, I do that all the way down to third graders. First and second's tough because you get some goofy stuff, right? Talking about snacks and things like that. No disrespect to snacks and snack time, but it's tough to really pull out the great things from our first and second graders. So we start at third grade, but again, every building has that group, and every building has those valued paths that we hear, and we implement based on what they need. And it's not just socially, it's academic equity too. I talked last week about standardized testing. There's equity issues there. There's equity issues between my district and yours right now. And that's a concern, and we need to address it and do what we can to fill those voids. So I know for a fact that those groups walk away feeling heard, because the next week when I'm in each one of those buildings, the amount of times I hear, Mr. Shell, when's our next meeting, makes me believe in the work and can continue to believe in cultural inclusion and valuing their paths. So that's work that I would bring here and add to it in the form of listening sessions. And I told that student today that our last meeting at the high school, we talked for an hour about school lunch and the food that we eat, because it was important to them. and they wanted to be heard about the food that they liked and didn't like. And I took that to our food services director. And I said, guys, grade our cafeteria food. They gave it a B. And I said, that's a win for public ed and cafeteria food. So I certainly took that to her as well. But, you don't just listen and then stop. You listen and then act, whether that's with your building principals around needs, whether that's with your food service director or facilities or safety. You listen and then you act related to inclusion.
Okay. And my last question is, how would you set priorities to address the needs of academically struggling students while addressing the needs of high-achieving students? Is it really possible to meet the needs of all students?
It's a great question. It's possible to do it simultaneously. Great question. It's possible to do it. And so here's the experience. I'll go back to Northville, one of the highest performing high schools in the state of Michigan. 2,500 students, 9 out of 10 students plus. 9.2 the last, I think, time I read about it, go on to a 4-year university. So you have that aspect of your building. But as I mentioned earlier, I oversaw our MTSS program in the district. I'm sorry, in the high school. And that MTSS process wasn't for these kids. It was for kids that had gaps, achievement gaps, math, ELA usually. So that's that piece. And then finally, I know this sounds like a lot, but we wore a lot of hats in a big building, oversaw what's called Core Academy. And Core Academy was for our at-risk students who simply were credit deficient and were at risk to not graduate. So we had students in one of the highest performing high schools in the state of Michigan who were at risk to walk in commencement. We have students who, at that same high school, who were 2 and 3 grade levels behind in math proficiency. And we had students who were going to University of Pennsylvania, right, going to an Ivy League school. So addressing all of those, I'll go back to systems. So I'll address it in the middle. Again, redundant but important. MTSS process is crucial. It's the difference between truly real growth and not growing. That's the group that can probably grow the most, in my opinion. And that system must be in place. It must be led strong. It must have a great team, and it must have places to go. You can't sit in the room and talk about data and grades and teacher feedback and that this student needs to be intervened on and not have a place to send them. If they need math help, you need math intervention. But if you don't have a math interventionist, what do? We don't have that in our district right now. We're doing everything we can to find a way to fund math interventionists. It's important. We have reading interventionists, but not math. It's vital. We have to have a place to send them. So that's resources. That's important. This group here, we changed the Michigan Merit Curriculum. We were able to shave off some, we didn't change the Michigan Merit Curriculum. We were given permission from the state to, essentially what you do is carve out electives that those students need and go at, we call it Core Academy because it was the core classes they need to have to graduate. We utilized the software program, put a teacher in the room to oversee it, and we had kids graduating that wouldn't have without that program. Lastly, I'll go back to this group here. This goes back to Trustee Kumar's question about curriculum. Instructional strategies, and the curriculum that those strategies are implementing. It's vital in a rigorous district related to academic excellence like Bloomfield or even Northville, that you have a team in place to ensure that, A, curriculum is strong, and you go about the proper audits of that, which we talked about. But I'm of the mindset that the curriculum's great, but if we're not instructionally implementing that curriculum with fidelity and engagement and multiple instructional strategies every hour, you guys are on a block schedule at the high school. That's 90 minutes. A teacher has to get after it for 90 minutes, and that's not easy. They're rolling their sleeves up for a while, so you have to have 5, 6 instructional strategies at a school like Bloomfield with these high performers who want to be engaged, who want to be challenged, and want that rigor and expect it. So it's a combination of those two. I'm sure the curriculum is strong. You need to audit it and do that work. But the instruction that is utilized to implement that curriculum is, in my opinion, the most important aspect of that. Because if you have a teacher who's not doing that well, the curriculum doesn't mean much. But if you have a teacher who is doing both of those things at a high level, instruction and implementation of that curriculum, you will challenge those high-level students. You will grow them. and you will help them achieve the goals that they want to achieve. You're welcome.
Good evening. Four more questions to go. Two
Okay.
board questions, two
Thank you.
student questions. What is your philosophy regarding employing teacher leaders, teacher instructional coaches, teacher consultants, and similar administrative positions versus employing more teachers with smaller class sizes?
Wow, yeah. Oof. We don't have that in our district now. And we're in the conversation right now about class sizes. When I say we, this is my assistant soup of finance and myself, because our class sizes are still low. We came out of COVID with them low, and they remain pretty low. We operate right now today under a $800,000 deficit that we need to clean up, and we will. Hard to clean that up when your average high school class size is 20. I would love to teach a class of 20, of 12, of 15. That would be amazing. But we have to be realistic around the work that we're doing and balance that. So for us, I'll go back to the first part of the question in a second. It's the second, in my district, it's the second part of the question. We're battling class sizes and the teacher aspect of it. In the event that we are, in the condition that this district is financially, in the event you can have teacher leaders, in the event you can have instructional coaches, teacher consultants, and similar administrative positions financially and afford that and stay strong from a fund equity perspective, I love it. I think it's a fantastic plan. Right? It's a great conduit between your principal, assistant principal, your teachers, and they can focus specifically on teaching and learning. A principal has to step out and handle discipline. A principal has to step out and meet with a parent. A principal has to take a phone call. A principal has to meet with, you name it. So for their ability to focus solely and intentionally on that work to help lead your teachers is difficult. So then in the event that we would be in a space in my district and or in Bloomfield where that was financially an option, I would absolutely support that work. I think it can only help. Now, who is that? That goes back to building your team, and high character, integrity, people who have been in those spaces, right? Like I'm talking about from an experience perspective. It's hard to be a teacher leader when you haven't taught. It's hard to be a teacher consultant when you haven't taught. So really getting after it and finding people that would impact our teachers and they would trust and certainly believe in, I think would be an important part of that process. But then in the event they can be implemented into a district and into a school, I think that's certainly a great option. Absolutely believe in it, yeah.
We all selected these questions or drafted these questions individually. So this one has some similar characteristics to the other questions that have been asked. So if you could use a separate example.
Yeah.
But I'll read the question now. Please share an example of how you planned and held a difficult conversation. What guiding principles helped you plan it? How did it go? What did you learn from the experience?
Had a great conversation at the high school with some of your BHEA leadership. And it was around negotiations. So as I had mentioned in the first round, we ratified our teacher contract in December. And I am our lead negotiator in our district. So I sat in the room with our team of 5 and their team of 5, UniServe, district, Education Association leadership. And for 88 hours, we went back and forth about this new contract and prohibited subjects of bargaining and all of those great things. Now, why am I bringing that up? Because the level of difficult conversation that you have to have in that space when it comes to bargaining is significant. And truly, you really have to be comfortable with it. And not everyone is, but it's part of the work that we have to do, and difficult conversations have to take place to get us on the other side. Now, what I talked to those individuals today at the high school about was we switched over to what's called interest-based bargaining this year for the first time. In our district, had always been traditional bargaining, which is for us, an attorney, for them, a UNICEF director, and a lot of this. And it wasn't conducive to my leadership style and my goal for our district around collaboration and culture, and it just didn't work for me. So we took a step with IBB, with the goal of the guiding principle being collaboration. We have to have a culture of collaboration with this is our biggest bargaining unit in the district, having the culture of collaboration in interest-based bargaining, if you're doing it the right way, which I'm very confident that we did because we were successful in the end, it means that even after these difficult conversations, which there were plenty, very respectful, but plenty of difficult conversations, when you're done, you're able to still say that we appreciate the level of collaboration that we all had. And after 88 hours, I can factually tell you that we walked out of the room having been able to say that. So it is a heavy lift, and it is filled with opportunities to go sideways related to difficult conversations. But if we're committed to collaboration, that guiding principle, it stays where it needs to be, and we continue to move that discussion to a successful place, and we did that. We lived it. And again, in a district like ours, I'm the lead negotiator in that space along with our assistant Supt of finance, and we have to take, we talked about this in the first round, the budget that we have and marry it to that new contract and show that we value them and we appreciate them, and there's movement and growth, and that's hard to do. When, as I mentioned, we have a deficit this year as well, so it was even more difficult to do. But we did it, and we're going to be okay. We're going to fix that $800,000. Our teachers are very happy with that contract. We're happy with that contract, and I think we modeled what true collaboration is, weathered some difficult storms, difficult conversations and storms along the way. But part of this work is you have to do that. But there was mutual collaboration and respect, and we were successful in that regard.
Thank you. Our student intern, Story Huntley, will ask the new questions. Yes, thank you.
Okay. I'm Story Huntley. I'm from the International Academy, and I'm a student on the advisory committee for the board. How do you ensure that the district is meeting the needs of all students, including those with special needs or from underrepresented backgrounds?
Mm-hmm. Let's go back to our teams. So I've talked a lot about our students with special needs and our students with disabilities related to unified sports. I've talked a lot about our underrepresented students at Clawson that we bring to the table. And if you're not having the appropriate conversations with those involved in all of this work, then you're going to miss. You're not going to achieve the goals that you want to achieve in terms of meeting the needs of all these students. Now, I challenge somebody who doesn't have that a space in their home where they live with a student, for example, with autism, to understand. It's hard to understand that, but at least with what we do in our district, and clearly Bloomfield does the same, and it's a pillar of the work that we do. We take them away from that space in difficult environment for a few hours and put them in our gym or on our soccer field or pushing around the coffee cart in our high school and incorporating them into our culture, which is crucial. So that's one example, but I think it goes without saying, and clearly there's a theme tonight around student voice and need. We can't guess what that need is for an underrepresented student. We can't guess what that need is with a family with a student with special needs. we have to go to them and understand it and find out. So in an effort to meet those needs, it starts in those spaces to understand those needs first, and then implement the resources and supports that we likely can in a public school to meet all those needs.
How do you plan to prioritize the needs and concerns of students in your decision-making process as superintendent?
As I told those 30 today, which, by the way, you should be so proud, which I'm sure you are. I think Paul was in there for sure today, and so they were so engaged, that group. Their nonverbals were adult-like. It was so impressive, the amount of head nods and tilts that I was getting. It was awesome. And I told them in the room that I'm not going to talk about it today. I'm going to be about it, meaning when I say I'm going to be in their space, appreciating them and supporting them and honoring them and prioritizing them, I'm going to be in their space doing that. I've never had more productive conversations that I've had sitting at a lunch table with students, talking about their needs and concerns. Might be around the food in the cafeteria, who knows? Clearly, your cafeteria it has a very strong selection. Well, you're at the IA, so, but at BHSTV, it was very impressive. So it again starts there, but anybody can sit here and say that. In our district, we do that, and I have to model that and lead that. Again, we can't guess. We can't pretend that we, as a 49-year-old adult male sitting in a conference room, know the answers to that. So we have to go get them. And if you aren't intentional about that work to go get them, there's no chance that that decision-making process as a superintendent would be successful. Now, does it mean that when they say, we don't like this pizza, we're going to get new pizza? Not necessarily, but we're going to have the conversation about it. Does it mean that when they don't feel supported from a mental health perspective and well-being perspective, that we're going to go out and hire a social worker tomorrow? No, we're going to put that social worker that we have or school psych that we have in front of them today because we're staffed in that regard. Just an example. So, but we have to understand those needs and concerns first, and you do it through building trust and relationships, and you do that through connecting with them, connecting with you, and going to the IA, which we were today. It was awesome, fantastic. Started in the math class right at the front of the building, there were 2 Clawson kids in there. It was great to see them. So had a great time there. So that's what we would do to prioritize all of that work from the superintendent's seat for sure. Great question, though. I appreciate that.
Ms. Huntley, I want to thank you for appearing on behalf of the student interns and sitting through this process. It was very kind of you to do that, and we appreciate the perspectives you brought tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Shellenbarger, which I was not saying that properly initially, but
13 letters, it's not
I
easy,
heard you
get
say it. So, Mr. Shellenbarger, we would like to take a few minutes now to provide you an opportunity to ask any questions you might have for the board.
I actually do not have any. The amount of preparation and diligence I've done to prepare myself for this few weeks is, I feel very strong about what I think the needs are from your perspective, from your district's perspective, what's going great, the fantastic work that's being done, and you guys have been fantastic related to helping me with that. And again, your staff was, and certainly Keith and Rebecca, who is on a different level of amazing, has done for me. So I don't actually have any questions, but I would love to leave you with a couple of closing remarks.
My next question was, do you like to make any closing remarks?
I would love to. Thought about this for since that first round. How do you put a bow on a process like this? Long day, great day. What a gift to be in buildings, and certainly again can't thank you enough for the opportunity to sit here. So thinking about how I close this, I'm going to close it in 3 buckets, and be efficient and precise with it. The first one is around experience, and I've spoken to you about my experience in like districts, as a teacher, as a building administrator, understanding what it's like to walk into your classroom on the first day and have those butterflies and teach that rigorous level of instruction to and curriculum to high-performing students, but also intervene on ones who need help. I have sat in the chair of an assistant principal at Northville and addressed those same high-level students, but also leading our intervention process to help those who need growth. Sat in the seat as a principal at Clawson and done all of that because we wear all of those hats and watched our district grow. And, I think it's important to note that because when I have conversations with all of those people, the teachers I talked to today, the principals I talked to today, I can speak to them from an informed space. And that builds trust. If I'm building relationships the right way with our staff, that builds trust because they know I have been in their space. And I think that that's important. The second bucket is that experience has led me to the superintendent's seat now and facilitating everything and having a fingerprint on everything that goes on in our district. And I'll say this, it's executive level leadership that has to sit in that seat and be confident in it. As I said, we sit in the room and collaborate. We sit in the room and facilitate. Cabinet, finance, HR, teaching and learning operations, bond, principals, evaluation, you name it, teachers, students, discipline. And the work that I have done to this point has lent itself to being successful in that space and being able to have the trust of those who work with me. Again, we collaborate extensively. Team is truly all that I know and operate from. But as I said before, at some point somebody has to step away from the table and step out of the room and communicate it. Somebody has to step in front of our community and communicate it, knowing that it might be difficult. Somebody has to go to a staff meeting and talk to our staff about building changes. That has to be that executive level leader. That has to be the superintendent, and that's the work that I do now. Did it yesterday, did it last week, we'll do it tomorrow. And that's what I seamlessly would be able to bring to BHS. Lastly, it's the community piece, and I've talked about that before. It's at every stop. Clearly, I take a lot of pride in the 3 stops and 3 places that I have been in those 3 communities, and they have embraced me, they've embraced my family, and I'm proud to have worked in all 3 of those places. Now, my family and I are in a situation where this is where we live, this is where we operate from, and this is where we love. And we're passionate about that. But I'm also passionate about public ed, and I'm also passionate about leadership, clearly. Hopefully my enthusiasm exudes that about the work that I do. So being able to connect those 2 seems like a need here and the right timing for here, for both the district around my skill set and this opportunity making complete sense for me to transition into as the next superintendent. So I'll close by saying thank you once again, regardless of your decision. Honored to sit here. Truly an honor to be in your district today and see all the great things that are happening through your support and decision-making, and what a gift to those students, families, and staff. So I will close on that and officially tap out for the day. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. Shellenbarger. We sincerely appreciate your time in our district today and your continued interest in being the next superintendent of Bloomfield Hills Schools. And that's an appropriate way to end because this has been a marathon of a day that started, I think, at 8 a.m. You met a lot of people, have seen a lot of things, and we greatly appreciate your willingness to go through this process. We're honored that you chose to do so, and thank you for your time today.
Okay.
So we expect to be prepared to make our final determination at a special meeting of the Board of Education at 7 p.m. on Thursday, May 9th. Thank you again for being with us today.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks.
All right. So moving on to section 4 on our agenda. The Board of Education will hold a special meeting on Thursday, May 2nd at 7 p.m. at the Booth Center to conduct the interview for Mr. Rick West. Tomorrow's meeting concludes the interview portion of the search process. The Board of Education will convene a special meeting on Thursday, May 9th at 7 p.m. at the Booth Center for the purpose of selecting the superintendent of Bloomfield Hills Schools with a tentative start date of July 1st, 2024. Moving on to Section 5 on the agenda, public comment. It appears we do not have any public comment this evening. Unless anyone has anything they'd like to address, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.